But in the winter, freezing cold draughts, I think, blew across the floor all night long, and it was awful. There wasn't any question of them being able to buy a better house, or even one more bed to sleep in. They were far too poor for that. Mr. and Mrs. Mr. Bucket was the only person in the family with a job. He worked at a toothpaste factory where he sat all day long at a bench and screwed the little caps on the tops of the cube. Why are there so many of toothpaste after the tubes have been filled? But a toothpaste cap screwer is never paid very much money, and poor Mr. Bucket, however hard he worked, and however fast he screwed on the caps, he was never able to make enough money to buy one half of the things that so large a family needed. There wasn't even enough money to buy proper food for them all. The meals they could own they could afford were bread and sorry, pardon me. Margarine, I think. Bread and margarine for breakfast, boiled potatoes and cabbage for lunch, and cabbage soup for dinner. Oh wait, supper. I think that's okay. I think. Think and reality are very different, but I think that's okay. Boiled potatoes is really delicious, but not like a little bland. Wait a minute. Okay. Sundays were a bit better. They all look forward to Sundays because because then, although they had the exact although they had exactly the same time, everyone was allowed to everyone was allowed a second helping. The Buckets, of course, didn't starve, but every one of them, the two old grandfathers, the two old grandmothers, Charlie's father, Charlie's mother, and especially little Charlie himself, went about from morning till night with a horrible empty feeling in their tummies. Charlie felt it worst of all, and although his father and mother often went without their own share of lunch or supper so that they could give it to him, it still wasn't nearly enough for a growing boy. He desperately wanted something more filling and satisfying than cabbage and cabbage soup. The one thing he longed for more than anything else was chocolate. Yes, chocolate is very, very delicious, especially when you eat healthy stuff and then eat. Walking to school in the mornings, Charlie could see great slabs of chocolate piled up high in the shop windows, and he would stop and stare and press his nose against the glass, his mouth watering like mad. Well, I don't very like chocolate, because that's a little bitter and too sweet sometimes. So I often go with not chocolate but candy. Candy, yeah. I like candy more than chocolate, but chocolate is very, very delicious. I can agree with that. Many times a day, he would see other children taking bars of creamy chocolate out of their pockets and munching them greedily. And that, of course, was pure torture. Yeah. If you see, something you like and someone is using or eating them, you feel really jealous and that was this, and that is pure torture. I can agree with that. I think that's going to be my line when I'm reading this. Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, it's really fun to say like that or like a catchphrase or something. Yeah. Eh. Okay. Only once in a year on his birthday did Charlie Bucket ever got to taste a bit of chocolate. The whole family saved up their money for that special occasion. And when the great day arrived, Charlie was always presented with one small chocolate bar to eat all by himself. And each time he received it, one on those marvelous birthday mornings, he would place it carefully in a small wooden box that he owned and treasure it as although it were a bar of solid gold. And for the next few days he would allow himself to only to look at it but never to touch it. Then at the last and then at last when he could stand it no longer, he would peel back a tiny bit of tiny bit of paper wrapping at one corner to expose a tiny bit of chocolate. And then he would take a tiny nibble, just enough to allow the love the, the lovely sweet taste to spread out slowly over his tongue. The next day, he would take another tiny nibble, and so on, and so on. And this and in this way, Charlie would make his sixpenny bar of birthday chocolate last him more than a month, for more than a month. But I haven't yet told about the one awful thing that tortured little Charlie. Oh, sorry. Not the full screen, sorry. The lover of chocolate more than anything else. This thing for him was far worse than eating slabs of chocolate in the shop windows or watching other children munching bars of creamy chocolate right in front of him. It was the most terrible, torturing thing you could imagine. And it was this. In the town itself, actually within sight of the house in which Charlie lived, there was an enormous chocolate factory. Just imagine that. It wasn't simply an ordinary enormous chocolate factory either. It was the largest and most famous in the whole world. It was Wonka's factory, owned by a man called Mr. Willy Wonka, the greatest inventor and maker of chocolates that there has ever been. And what a tremendous, marvelous place it was. It had huge iron gates leading to it, and a high wall surrounding it, and smoke belching from its chimneys, and strange whizzing sounds coming from deep inside it. And outside the walls, for half a mile around in every direction, the air was scented with heavy, rich smell of melting chocolate. Twice a day, on his way to and from school, little Charlie Bucket had to walk right past the gates of the factory, and every time he went by, he would begin to walk very, very slowly, and he would hold his nose high in the air and take long, deep sniffs of the gorgeous chocolatey smell around him. Oh, how he loved that smell. And oh, how he wished he could go inside the factory and see what it was like. How that wish became true. Oh, I'm sorry. Spoilers. I'll cut that out. I mean, I do very, very lot of spoilers, but this one was just rude. But I think someone who didn't see this is like very young or doesn't watch TV or books that much. Just yeah, I don't know. But I'll put on spoiler alert in the screen, and then how to skip. Wait, which time to skip? Okay, and you can never hear this talk. Yeah, and so let's start again. In the evenings, after he had finished his supper of watery cabbage soup, uh, Charlie always went into the room of his four grandparents to listen to their stories, and then afterwards to say goodnight. Every one of these old people was over 90, yeah. They were as shriveled as prunes and as bony as skeletons. And throughout the day, until Charlie made his appearance, they lay huddled in their one bed, two at the two at either end, with nightcaps on. Sorry, my nose is like playing tricks on me. Oh, sorry. With nightcaps on to keep their heads warm, dozing the time away with nothing to do. But as soon as they heard the door opening and heard Charlie's voice saying, "Good evening, Grandpa Joe and Grandpa Josephine and Grandpa George and Grandpa Georgina," then all four of them would suddenly sit up, their own wrinkled faces, and light up with smiles of pleasure, and the talking would begin. For they loved this little boy. He was the only bright thing in their lives. And this evening, visits were something that they looked forward to all day long. Often Charlie's mother and father would come in as well and stand by the door, listening to the stories that the old people told, and thus, for perhaps half an hour every night, this room would become a happy place, and the whole family would forget that it was hungry and poor. One evening, when Charlie went to see his grandparents, he said to him, "Is it really true that Wonka's chocolate factory is the biggest in the world?" "True," cried all four of them at once. "Of course it's true. Good heaven, didn't you know about that? It's about 50 times as big as any other. And is Mr. Willy Wonka really the cleverest chocolate maker in the world?" "My dear boy," said Grandpa Joe, raising himself up a little higher on his pillow, "Mr. Willy Wonka is the most amazing, most fantastic, and most extraordinary chocolate maker the world has ever seen. I thought everybody knew that." "I knew it was famous, Grandpa Joe, and I knew he was clever." "Clever?" cried the old man. "He's more than that. He's a magician with chocolate. He can make anything he wants. Isn't that a fact, my dears?" The other three old people nodded their heads slowly up and down and said, "Absolutely true, just as true as it can be." And Grandpa Joe said, "You mean to say I've never told you about Mr. Willy Wonka and his factory?" "Never," answered little Charlie. "Good heavens above, I don't know what's the matter with me." "Will you tell me now, Grandpa Joe, please?" "I certainly will. Sit down beside me on the bed my dear, and listen carefully. Yeah. Grandpa Joe was the oldest of the four grandparents. He was 96 and a half. Wow, that's old. And that is just as old as anybody can be. Like all extremely old people, he was very delicate and weak, and throughout the day he spoke very little. But in the evenings, when Charlie, his beloved grandson, was in the room, he seemed in some marvelous ways to grow quite young again, and all his tiredness fell away from him, and he became as eager and excited as a young boy. Oh, what a man he is, Mr. Willy Wonka, cried Grandpa Joe, invited that he himself that he has himself invited more than 200 new kinds of chocolate bars, each with a different century, each far sweeter and creamier and more delicious than anything the other chocolate factories can make. Perfectly true, cried Grandpa Josephine, and he sends them all the four corners of the earth. Isn't that so, Grandpa Joe? It is, my dear. It is. And to all the kings and presidents of the world as well. But it isn't the only chocolate bars it isn't only chocolate bars he makes. Oh dear me, no. He has some really fantastic inventions up his sleeve. Willy Wonka has. Did you know that he invented a way of making chocolate ice cream so that it stays cold for hours and hours without being in the refrigerator? You can even lie in the hot. You can even leave it lying in the sun all morning on a hot day and it won't go runny. But that's impossible, said little Charlie, staring at his grandfather. Of course it's impossible, cried Grandpa Joe. It's completely absurd, but Mr. Willy Wonka has done it. Quite right. Oh wait, I did not mean to do that, but yeah. The others agreed, nodding their heads. Mr. Wonka has done it. And then again, Grandpa Joe went on, speaking very, very slow now, so that Charlie wouldn't miss a word. Mr. Willy Wonka can make marshmallows that taste of violets, and rich caramels that change color every 10 seconds as you suck them, and little feathery sweets that melt away deliciously the moment you put them between your lips. You can make chewing gum that never loses its taste. I really want to try that. And sugar balloons that you can blow into enormous sizes before you pop them with a pin and gobble them up. And by a most secret method, you can make lovely blue birds' eggs with black spots on them. And when you put one of these in your mouth, it gradually gets smaller and smaller until suddenly there's nothing left except for a tiny little pink sugary baby bird sitting on the tip of your tongue. Grandpa Joe paused and ran the point of his tongue slowly over his lips. It makes my mouth water just thinking about it, he said. Mine too, said little Charlie. But please go on. While they were talking, Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, Charlie's mother and father, had come quickly into the room, and now both were standing just inside the door, listening. Tell Charlie about the crazy Indian princess, said Grandpa, Grandma Josephine. He'd like to hear that. You mean Prince Pondicherry? Said Grandpa Joe. And he began chuckling with laughter. Completely dotty, said Grandpa George. But very rich, said Grandpa Georgina. What did he do? Asked Charlie eagerly. Listen, said Grandpa Joe, I'll tell you. Chapter 3, Mr. Wonka and the Indian Prince. We're going full story mode now. Prince Pondicherry wrote a letter to Mr. Willy Wonka, said Grandpa Joe, and asked him to come all the way out to India and build him a colossal palace entirely made of chocolate. Sorry. Oh, okay. Oh my God. My condition is not so good. He did indeed. And what a palace it was. It had 100 rooms, and everything was made of either dark or light chocolate. The bricks were chocolate, and the cement holding them together was chocolate, and the windows were chocolate, and all the walls and ceilings were made out of chocolate. Can you imagine that? So were the carpets and the pictures and the furniture and the beds. And when you turned on the taps up in the bathroom, hot chocolate came pouring out. When it was all finished, Mr. Wonka said to Prince Pondicherry, I warn you though, it wouldn't last very long, so you better start eating it right away. Nonsense, shouted the prince. It's not going to eat my palace. I'm not going to eat my palace. I'm not even going to nibble the staircase or lick the walls. I'm going to live with it. But Mr. Wonka was right, of course, because soon after this, there came a very hot day with a boiling sun, and the whole palace began to melt, and then it sank slowly to the ground, and the crazy prince was dozing in the living room at the time, woke up to find himself swimming around with a huge brown sticky lake of chocolate. Little Charlie sat very still on the edge of the bed, staring at his grandfather. Charlie's face was very bright and his eyes were stretched wide, so you could see the whites all around. Is this really true? He asked. Why are you pulling my leg? It's true, cried all the four old people at once. Of course it's true. Ask anyone you like. And I'll tell you something else that's true, said Grandpa Joe. And now he has leaned closer to Charlie and lowered his voice to a soft, secret whisper. Nobody ever comes out. Out of where? Asked Charlie. And nobody ever goes in. And if you didn't hear that comment, in where? Cried Charlie. Uncle's factory, of course. Grandpa, what do you mean? I mean workers, Charlie. Workers? All factories, said Grandpa Joe, have workers' streets, steaming in and out of the gates in the mornings and evenings, except Wonka's. Have you ever seen a single person going into that place or coming out? Little Charlie looked slowly around at each of the four old faces, one after the other, and they all looked back at him. They were friendly, smiling faces. But they were also quite serious. There was no sign of joking or leg pulling on any of them. Well, have you? Asked Grandpa Joe. I really don't know, Grandpa, Charlie stammered. I think. Whether I whether I walk past the factory, the gates seem to be closed. Exactly, said Grandpa Joe. But there must be people working there. Not people, Charlie. Not ordinary people, anyway. Then who? Cried Charlie. Aha, that's it. You see, that's an that's another of Mr. Willy Wonka's cleverness. Charlie dear, said Mr. Bucket called out from where she was standing by the door. It's time for bed. That's enough for tonight. But mother, I must hear. Tomorrow, my darling. That's right, said Grandpa Joe. I'll tell you the rest of it tomorrow morning. And tomorrow. Chapter 4. The Secret Workers. The next evening, Grandpa Joe went on with his story. You see, Charlie, he said, not so very long ago, there used to be thousands of people working in Mr. Willy Wonka's factory. Then one day, all of a sudden, Mr. Wonka had to ask every single one of them to leave, to go home, never to come back. But why? Asked Charlie. Because of spies. Spies? Yes. And all the other chocolate makers, you see, had begun to grow jealous of the wonderful seeds that Mr. Wonka was making. And they started sending in spies to steal his secret recipes. Sorry. The spies took jobs in the Wonka factory, pretending that they were ordinary workers. And while they were there, each one of them found exactly how a certain special thing was made. And did they go back to their own factories and tell? Asked Charlie. They must have, answered Grandpa Joe, because soon after that, Fickle Grubber's factory started making an ice cream that would never melt, even in the hottest sun. Then Mr. Prodnose's factory came out with a chewing gum that never lost its flavor, however much you chewed it. And then Mr. Slugworth's factory began making sugar balloons that could blow up to huge sizes before pop them with a pin and gobble them up. And so on, and so on. And Mr. Willy Wonka tore his beard and shouted, "This is terrible. I shall be ruined. There are spies everywhere. I shall have to close the factory." But he didn't do that, Charlie said. Oh, yes, he did. He told all the workers that he was sorry, but they would have to go home. Then he shut the main gates and fastened them with a chain. And suddenly, Wonka's giant chocolate factory became silent and deserted. The chimneys stopped smoking. The machines stopped whirring. And from then on, not a single chocolate or sweet was made. Not a soul went in or out, and even Mr. Willy Wonka himself disappeared completely. Months and months went by, said Grandpa Joe. Grandpa Joe said, went on. But still the factory remained closed, and everybody said, poor Mr. Wonka, he was so nice, and he made such marvelous things, but he's finished now. It's all over. Then something astonishing happened. One day, early in the morning, columns of white smoke were seen to be coming out of the tops of the tall chimneys of the factory. Wait a minute. Okay. I'll finish this chapter and then go and finish the video, okay? Okay? Okay. People in the town stopped and stared. What's going on? They cried. lit the furnaces. Mr. Wonka must be opening up again. Up again. They ran to the gates, expecting to see them wide open and Mr. Wonka standing there to welcome his workers back. But no, the great iron gates were still locked and chained as securely as ever, and Mr. Wonka was nowhere to be seen. But the factory is working. The people shouted. Listen, you can hear the machines. They're all whirring again. And you can smell the smell of melting chocolate in the air. Grandpa Joe leaned forward and laid a long, bony finger on Charlie's knee. And he said softly, but most mysterious of all, Charlie, were the shadows in the windows of the factory. The people standing on the street outside could see small dirt shadows moving about behind the frosted glass windows. Shadows of whom? Charlie asked quickly. That's exactly what everyone else wanted to know. The place is full of workers, the people shouted, but nobody got in. Nobody's gone in. The gates are closed. The gates are locked. It's crazy. Nobody ever comes out either. But there was no question at all, said Grandpa Joe, that the factory was burning, and it's gone on running ever since. For these last 10 years, what's more, the chocolate and sweets it's been turning out have become more fantastic and delicious all the time. And of course, now when Mr. Wonka invents some new and wonderful sweet, neither Mr. Fickle Grubber, nor Mr. Prodnose, nor Mr. Slugworth, nor anybody else is able to copy. No spies can go in the factory to find out how it was made. But Grandpa, who, cried Charlie, who is Mr. Wonka using to do all the work in the factory? Nobody knows, Charlie. But that's absurd. Hasn't someone asked Mr. Wonka? Nobody sees him anymore. He never comes out. The only things that come out of that place are chocolates and sweets. They come out through a special trapdoor in the wall, all packed and addressed. And they are picked up every day by post office trucks. But Grandpa, what sort of people are they that work there? My dear boy, said Grandpa Joe, that is one of the greatest mysteries of the chocolate-making world. We know one thing about them. They are very small. The faint shadows that sometimes appear behind the windows, especially late at night when the lights are on, are those tiny people no taller than my knee. There aren't such people, Charlie said. Sorry. If you didn't read it, spoilers. Okay, I don't remember. Okay. Just then, Mr. Bucket, Charlie's father, came into the room. He was home from the toothpaste factory, and he was waving an evening newspaper rather excitedly. Have you heard the news? He cried. He held up the paper so that they could see the huge headline. The headline said, Wonka Factory to be opened at last to lucky few. And that's about it. Yeah. I was gonna do 40 minutes, but nah, I'm just gonna clip fan and see what happens. But anyways, this has gone really long, so okay, I'm just gonna stop here. This was me reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl. And and thank you for watching this video. I can't make an intro or outro or whatsoever, so sorry about that. But I'm back in a few months. Wait, 1 month or few weeks or so. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye guys. Have a good day, or actually a great day.